Hi, I'm Bobby Harden at the Historic Arkansas Museum, and today we're in the Brownie Kitchen, where I'm going to talk to you a bit about the history of jack-o'-lanterns and carving pumpkins, and we're going to carve one also. Now, the first thing you got to do is, well, get the right pumpkin. Most of the pumpkins in the U.S. are for carving, so that shouldn't be that hard. And then you want to scoop out all the innards. I went ahead and did this ahead of time because, depending on how irritable the pumpkin can be, this can take a little bit. You want to scoop out all of the guts and seeds. Using a metal serrated spoon or a plastic one, you can find these at the store. At the time, they probably just would have used their hands or just an old scraping knife, whatever they had. Luckily, we don't have to, get our hands all slimy with pumpkin guts, although we may enjoy that. Once you've cleaned out the pumpkin, you got to make your design. Now, if you are really artsy and talented, you can just freehand it. That's what they would have done. That's what a lot of people can do. I'm not one of those people. So, for the rest of us, we will use a stencil, which is a design already made out on paper. And so what you do is you poke holes around the design, so you get a nice little outline in the pumpkin itself. Continue doing that, and then it's just a matter of connecting the dots. Now, you can use anything to poke the holes. Skewer, probably not a wooden one. Pumpkin's pretty tough, but a fork works just as well. Now, the original carving fruit or vegetable of choice was actually a turnip or a potato. Really, any root vegetables were used. This was back in Ireland, where the carving tradition really started. And then when they came to the New World, immigrated mostly in the 1800s, largely in the 1800s, they found that pumpkins were much bigger and better for carving. And now the term jack-o'-lantern actually has a lot of history behind it, and not all of it is clear, but there is an Irish legend about Stingy Jack. And there are multiple variations of this legend, but basically, Stingy Jack, given his name, was very stingy and didn't want to pay for a drink. He had, so he tricked the devil into turning into a silver coin to pay for the drink, and then he put the silver coin in his pocket next to a cross, so the devil couldn't change back, and trapped him in his pocket. And he agreed to let the devil out on two conditions. One was that he would leave him alone for a year. Second is that he wouldn't take his soul when he died. The devil agreed, and so he released him. The next year, he tricked him again by having him climb a tree to get some fruit, and then carved a cross in the tree trunk, so the devil couldn't get down. And he said, if you don't come back for 10 years, I will let you down. And he agreed. Eventually, Jack dies, and because of his unsavory characteristics, being so stingy and tricking people, God was like, no, you can't come into heaven. But the devil followed his agreement and didn't let Jack into hell either. So he was forced to wander the earth in darkness. However, he was given a burning coal to light his way, which he put in a hollowed out turnip. And that's where you get the legend of Jack of the Lantern, or Stingy Jack. Now, pumpkins were the natural progression from that, being much larger. And in the US, pumpkins actually have a very rich history. They were cultivated thousands of years ago, probably 3,000 BC. They were being farmed around the same time as corn in Central America. We're almost done here with the holes in the pumpkin. Native Americans enjoyed pumpkins. They like to roast them. They would cut them into strips and roast them. They would even weave them into mats. All right, so we've got the design laid out. We can take this bit off. getting the stencil on the pumpkin can be a challenge because you're trying to put this two-dimensional flat design on a three-dimensional round pumpkin, so it can get a little crinkly. So there you have the dots that make your design. So now you just gotta connect them. The tool you probably want to use, you could use even a kitchen knife as long as it's serrated. It has teeth on it, like a saw. That'll make it a lot easier. I have a special pumpkin carver that I just got at the store, but they would have just used any old serrated knife. And they would have had a lot of them to choose from. Now, the designs back then were much simpler. Probably just would have been some grotesque faces, like the popular kind we have today with pumpkins. Because the goal was to ward off evil spirits. We've got a piece, just shove that deep into the pumpkin. And right now we're just trying to get all the big pieces out. We can clean it up later. You want to make sure to do this over a plate because, you know, you're cutting up a fruit. Those get messy. Now, during the 1800s, pumpkins have rose in popularity, especially in Arkansas, because they were plentiful and they were big. And so you could get a lot of food out of them, and then you could also haul them out, dry them out, and use them for containers. They would have done that with a lot of gourds. Now, pumpkin pie, as we know it, didn't exist for a while. Their original pumpkin pie used the pumpkin itself as crust. So you would hollow out the pumpkin, much like for a jack-o'-lantern. That's not cut all the way. Much like for a jack-o'-lantern, and then that in the bucket with all the other guts. And then you would fill up the pumpkin with a mixture of milk, honey, spices, and then you would roast it on the fire for an hour or so and mix the pumpkin flesh with all the stuff on the inside, and you would kind of have a pumpkin custard of sorts. Now, pumpkin pie we know and love today, the open-faced orange pie with the crust, did exist at the time. However, it took a lot more effort. It's not nearly as popular. Now this door here is going to be tricky because you have to cut the pumpkin really thin. Careful not to push it too hard, otherwise you'll break the pumpkin. There we go. And I'll cut this little square out. You gotta be careful here. If you're using a pointed knife, do not do this because it'll stab your finger. This knife doesn't have a point on it, so I don't have to worry about it. Now, if you do it really well, the pumpkin will look really nice, and of course you'll want to try to preserve it, because even today's pumpkins with all their preservatives will start to rot in a couple days. So you want to try to coat it with lemon juice will work for a short amount of time. Petroleum jelly would be a good way to preserve it. However, If you really want it to last a while, you gotta use a mixture of water and bleach. Water to keep it hydrated and actually keep it from rotting. Bleach to prevent mold. Go with the doorway here. That is the tricky part, because you have all this thin pumpkin here. And of course, I'll go back over this and clean it up. Now it's got a triangle shape and a square shape, which shouldn't be too difficult. There we go, and last piece. Yep, and it does need to be cleaned up. That is our finished carving there. So you can stick a light in it. Electric would be better, because especially if you're using petroleum jelly to preserve it, or bleach, because those are flammable. So use an artificial light, and it also helps the pumpkin stay fresh longer. There we go. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit, and then we can set it outside, and we'll be good. So thank you for joining me today at the Historic Arkansas Museum, and make sure to check out more online content and come see us.